It's time for this week's episode of Brandon Sports Talk, featuring in-depth interviews from those who are trending in the world of athletics. And now, here's the host of Brandon Sports Talk, Brandon Pate.
Welcome back to Brandon Sports Talk. In today's episode, I have the privilege to interview Jackson Thompson, who is a Sports Illustrated writer. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well.
Can you talk about how you knew that you wanted to start being a sports writer?
Yeah, when I was in high school, I was a sports editor at the student newspaper, the Rampage at Hightstown High School. And it was one of my favorite things to do as a teenager. You know, a lot of kids had other things. I played football and I did the student newspaper. And I remember back my junior year, we all took a trip to Rutgers. There was a student newspaper, high school student newspaper conference going on. And I attended a couple lectures by professional sports writers, and they sold me on it. They talked about their jobs and, you know, the daily work routine, or it's not really a routine when you're in the sports writing business. It's day by day. You always have new stuff come up and you have to be ready to tackle it on the fly. And I thought that was cool. And I was just very intrigued by the lifestyle and just the work. So I decided, you know, then that's what I'm going to try and do for a profession. You know, that's what I've been pursuing ever since. And when I got to Rutgers, I did the newspaper, the student newspaper there, the Daily Targum. I was a sports editor. I covered the football team, wrestling team, the women's soccer team, and the men's basketball team. They had a great season this past year before it got cut short due to the quarantine. And then I just built up a body of work, and that got me the opportunity I have now with Sports Illustrated covering the Giants.
Can you talk about your experience working for Sports Illustrated?
Yeah, it's been great. It's been great. They gave me a lot of opportunities to interview athletes, attend press conferences, and I've covered every Giants game. And, you know, there's always a lot of drama to cover with the Giants. Not a whole lot of success. They're 1-7. But they always make it interesting. You know, last night they were playing Tom Brady and the Bucs, and, you know, they were able to take a 14-3 lead. And, you know, at that point, you just sit there wondering, you know, like, how are they going to blow it this time? And they made sure they did. You know, they lost 25-23. There was an epic game, just an epic loss, just like every week has been. So, you know, so far it's been mostly a series of losses. That's my memories as a Sports Illustrated Giants writer. But, you know, it doesn't mean it's boring. There's always a lot of great athletes to talk about. They all have a lot of great individual stories. So it's all about finding, you know, the stories beyond the record, you know.
Can you talk about your experience working for the Boston Globe?
Well, I didn't work for the Boston Globe. Last summer, I covered the Hambletonian. I did 2 articles for them as part of the Clyde Hurt Journalism Workshop. It was a horse race up in the Meadowlands, and that's actually how I attended my first Giants training camp as well. So I got to. It was a week long workshop for student journalists, and with Debbie and Dave Little, formerly of the New York Post, and I got to attend the Giants training camp, meet some people there. I got to interview a Rutgers alum who was playing for the Giants, John Helleman, and a couple days later, we went to the Hambletonian, and I got to write a game recap on deadline of the race, and it was a great upset. It was a Canadian gentleman and a Canadian horse named Forbidden Trade, and they were able to pull this unbelievable upset, and it was just a great story. And that story is published in the Boston Globe, and the link is still up.
Can you talk about writing for the pro football writers?
Oh, you know, again, that's a union for professional football writers. You know, it's just they make sure we get our access to the players and the coaches, and, you know, they make sure we have film review, and you know, it's more of a union. It's not a publication. You know, they make sure that we get our credential and we get to do our job.
What teams have you covered in the sport for Sports Illustrated?
Well, last fall, I started out in the network covering Boston College because when I was covering Rutgers, Boston College came to play Rutgers in week 3 or week 4. It was their 3rd game after a bye week. And I, you know, wrote a couple preview stories, and I was at the game, and I made some tweets, and it was noticed by the Boston College publisher. And he, you know, invited me to come write for the site. So that's how I got my foot in the door for Sports Illustrated. And then, you know, through that connection, I was able to work my way up to cover the Giants.
What are some of your favorite moments of being a sports publisher?
For the Giants, I'd have to say I was interviewing Victor Cruz. I did that last week. One of my favorite players growing up. He had a promotion for Stella Artois selling stadium food because a lot of fans haven't been able to attend the stadium. And he partnered with a celebrity chef, Daniela Soto Innes, and I got to talk to him over the phone. And it was, an interview I had waited my entire life to do. I was a big Victor Cruz fan, so just getting the chance to talk to him. I talked to him a little bit about his promotion, his favorite food to eat when he goes to the stadium, and the chef Danielle. And then we also talked a little bit about the Giants, talked a little bit about Saquon Barkley and some of the Giants wide receivers and the advice he had for them. And then some of the other moments, I was at NJ.com. I covered high school sports last fall or last summer. It was the high school baseball state championships, and I got to cover all 4 state championship games. I got to help out the veteran full-time writers with some video and some stat entry, and those were some great games. It was there's in New Jersey high school baseball, there's 4 championships. There's not just one, there's four different divisions. So it was 4 games over the course of a whole day. And I was out at Hamilton, the famous field, and just from the morning till night. The first game was probably the most interesting because the team, the winning team came back from down 5 runs in the last inning, and it was just this epic comeback. And it's like, wow, what a way to start the day off. And then, the next 3 games weren't as eventful, but they were still pretty good games. The last game was 2-1, and it was under the lights. It was night. It was a great atmosphere. And then for Rutgers, just every single basketball game I went to, I mean, the crowds were just not every home basketball game. The Rutgers crowd was just nuts. They loved that team. They were doing something really special that year. There was crossing off all types of history. They were on their way to their first NCAA tournament in a long time. And just right before Selection Sunday, we got news that the basketball is canceled because of the COVID-19 virus. And, the fan base was left waiting. So when the college basketball season starts back up, they're going to be trying to get back. And that'll be fun to watch now as a fan because I don't cover them anymore, but, I'll be rooting on my alma mater, Rutgers, and I'm excited to see what they do this year too.
Can you talk about the traveling experience going from, like, for example, with the Sports Illustrated going to the New York Giants and maybe covering like Boston College and stuff?
It's all been remote. I've never traveled outside of New Jersey to cover anything. Obviously there's not been any travel this year. I guess the most travel I've ever done was when I covered high school sports for NJ.com. I would go to the different schools because obviously that can't be remote because, there's not live broadcast of high school sports like there is with college and professional sports. So I'm still not at the point where I've been able to get on a plane and stay at a hotel and to cover an event. That's still on my list, something I got to check off. But something I look forward to, and the traveling experience I've had to do myself, pay for my own gas, get in the car and just get there, write it in my car, so that's my traveling experience, traveling from North to South Jersey, covering games at high schools. And that's also something I enjoy doing a lot.
What do you look forward to happening whenever you get to be on the New York Giants field covering them?
Well, it's not. You see, as a sports journalist, you can't really hope for anything to happen. You need to be ready for anything to happen. Obviously, you want a good story, and you can't be picky. You got to look for anything and everything that could possibly happen. You got to find the story. You can't hope for a story. You got to find it. You can't expect anything. You got to just be aware. Don't have your mind preset on anything, and just find out what's interesting. You obviously want to be prepared, do your research, and have an idea about what might happen. But if things don't go according to plan, you got to be willing to find out what the details are then and crank out a story.
What are some of your favorite things that you've done while covering in Sports Illustrated and even in regular sports writing?
Well, it was like I said, the interview with Victor Cruz was obviously one of my favorites. And, just a lot of the stories. I like making videos. I like making videos for the website. That's a big part of the business now is multimedia. It's not just writing. So I love making videos, voiceovers and graphics and stuff like that, and sometimes some graphic design.
Can you talk about what are some of your things that you didn't know before you started being a sports publisher?
Yeah, I've just learned about the business. I've learned, how things, for something like the Giants, there's press conferences every single day. And, you learn a lot about the relationships that coaches and reporters build with each other, players and reporters build with each other, because they're almost like coworkers in a sense, not in the sense that they all represent the same place, but you learn about those dynamics between the coaches and the reporters and the players and the information directors, the people that organize everything. And it's interesting to see. It's like it's like a family in a way. It's like it's almost like a competition in and of itself. Obviously, teams are trying to protect themselves. They want to protect their image, and reporters are trying to find the story. So, for a team as bad as the Giants, it gets tricky sometimes, because, teams got to make sure their image is protected, and reporters got to reveal the truth. So it's a back and forth.
What advice would you give upcoming future sports publishers looking to get started into something?
Well, you definitely have to be very, very proactive. You can't wait for anything to come to you. You got to seek out the story and find it. And, you gotta be very, 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 very passionate. You have to be curious, and you also have to handle yourself the right way. You have to be polite, because especially when you're a young sports journalist trying to get into something, you don't have any leeway. You need to build it. You need to, find those connections. You have to build them, and you need to, work from behind, work from below. You have to, don't kiss ass or anything like that, but you gotta show these people that you're a good, you're a good person to work with, that you're respectful, and that you're willing to take the steps to make your way up.
Where can my listeners find you at on social media?
You can find me on Twitter at JacksonBHT. That's my main social media account, JacksonBHT.
Thank you again, Jackson, for your interview, and best of luck in your future as a Sports Illustrated publisher.
Thank you. Take care.
You can find Brandon Sports Talk on Facebook at Brandon Sports Talk, Instagram at Brandon Sports Talk, Twitter at Talk_Brandon, and you can find me on YouTube at Brandon Sports Talk. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you again, Jackson, for your interview, and best of luck.
You too. See you, Brandon.
You've been watching Brandon Sports Talk. Please feel free to like, share, and subscribe to Brandon Sports Talk on social media and on YouTube.